So recently we traveled to Bali, Indonesia, and unfortunately it was not a quick and easy process. So today I'm gonna break down all of the costs associated with our trip, and it might be a little different for you depending on where you're coming from. So first I have to admit it was not a cheap process. After looking at those numbers, it was not a cheap process, but by the end of this video, I'll share with you some tips and things you can do differently that can save you at least $500 on your trip. And I'm gonna get into every single detail with you guys, from the moment we applied for our visa to the moment we arrived in our villa in Bali. Alright, so let's get straight into it. But first, I will break down the cost for 2 people and for 1 person, because I know it was 2 of us, it was me and Christina, but I know some of you guys will be traveling alone. So I'll break down the cost and give you for both scenarios. So first expense was the visa. That was about $400 per person, which was $800 for the 2 of us. And if you're wondering how we got our visas, I did a video a few weeks ago about how I got my visa to enter Indonesia, so you can check that out. The next expense, it's ridiculous because it's the smallest one of all of them, but I said I was gonna tell you every single thing that we spent our money on this trip, and so you can know exactly what to expect to spend money on to come here if you're trying to plan a trip here. But it was printing. So after we got our visas, our PCR test, we did go to a printer in Vietnam where we were coming from. So we went there and that only cost us $1. So for 1 person that would be 50 cents. For the 2 of us it was about $1 to print some sheets, so we can have them at the airport if they were requested of us. You can also have some of those documents on your phone, but we weren't sure, so we decided, hey, let's be safe and just print them out. So the next expense, which is a must for everyone traveling here because it's requested of you in order to get your visa to come here, is travel insurance. If you haven't watched my how to get a visa video, I did mention it there too. But travel insurance, we use one that cost us $40 per person, so that was $80 for us. It's great because as you're traveling, wherever you go, you can go to a clinic, you can go to a hospital, whatever it is, that health insurance that we use will reimburse you for everything. And we've been using them for the last 2.5 years now since we left Miami to go to Vietnam, and now we're in Bali, and we've been using them the whole time. So if you'd like to check them out, it's only $40 a month. Check in the description, I'll put a link to it. So like I said, they will request that you have health insurance, and they will also cover you if you lose your baggage at the airport or your stuff gets damaged. They will also cover all those flight cancellations, everything. And even if you have COVID at this moment, you will be covered. Next expense was the PCR test. We each had to get a PCR test done before coming here, 72 hours before we got on the plane. So that cost us $56 per person, which is $112 for the 2 of us. Now, like I said, depending on where you're coming from, your expenses will be slightly different, but I think they should be pretty similar depending on where you're coming from, especially if you're coming from another country here in Asia. I know a lot of people are going through the same thing that I went through. You can check out the whole story in my moving to Bali playlist. But the next expense is the flight to Saigon. We were coming from Da Nang, Vietnam. From Da Nang, we had to go to Saigon. Then we flew internationally to Singapore, and from Singapore, a layover to Jakarta, where we quarantined. And after quarantine, then we made it to Bali. So just keep that in mind as I go through all my costs here. So the next one is the flight to Saigon from Da Nang, where we lived, to Saigon. Cost us $30 per person, so that's $60 for the 2 of us. Once we arrived in Saigon, we did not book the same flight from Da Nang to Saigon the same day that we were supposed to fly out to Singapore, because we didn't want, there was a lot of cancellations happening, and there is a lot of chaos that was happening at that moment. We didn't want to take the chance, so we decided to stay 1 night just in case we had any problems with our flight. So we stayed 1 night at a hotel there called Prague Airport Hotel, and I think that room was about $17 for the night. So while we're in Saigon and we needed to get from the airport to the hotel, then the next morning from the hotel to the airport, that cost us about $5 for transportation. So one of the things that some airlines will request from you is that you have a return ticket. They understand you are going to another country, but they want to know when are you leaving. So some of them will ask you to show them proof of your flight out of that country that you're going into. So we didn't know that. If you want to check out that story, I have in some of my previous videos, you'll see my flight from my most stressful day ever check out that video if you want to see what we went through to get here to Bali. Once we got to the airport, we found out we needed that return ticket, and we didn't really know that we needed one at the time. We're learning quite a bit. We're new travelers, so we had to book a ticket out of Indonesia right then and there. So as proof, we decided to buy a quick cheap ticket from Indonesia to Singapore, and then we showed that as proof, and then we could get on the plane. And those flights cost us about $140 per person, which is $280 for 2 people. So now it's time for the international flight. We're in Saigon, and we're gonna fly from Saigon to Singapore for a few hour layover, and then we're gonna get to Jakarta. Those international tickets cost us $236 per person, which is $473 for 2 people from Vietnam to Indonesia. Now, once we arrived in Indonesia, to Jakarta, specifically where we have to quarantine, the quarantine hotel room that we chose the biggest one, so we understand it's not the cheapest one. That one would have been $700 for 1 person, but since it's 2 of us, we paid $875. If you want to know more about the quarantine process, in one of our previous videos, we have a quarantine video, so check it out and you'll see what it was like. And also, the $700 for 1 person and the $875 for 2 people is for 5 nights, all right? So that includes everything. That included 3 meals a day, laundry every single day, and 2 PCR tests per person. So $875 was for 5 nights at that quarantine hotel. Now, we finally finished with quarantine, and we decided to go to Jakarta to explore a bit before flying to Bali. So we decided to stay for a few days. We ended up staying in Jakarta for 2 days because the cases were going way up, and we decided to leave as soon as possible. So the Airbnb that we got was $19 per night, which is $38 for 2 days for the 2 of us. So during those 2 days, we were ordering on Grab a lot. The prices we found were not Asian prices, if you know what I mean. Meaning, we found ourselves ordering a lot of Western food from the app, and those prices were not the cheapest. During those 2 days, we went to the mall. I had a meal for $10. If you want to check out the shopping mall video, also I have it in my previous videos. But we ended up spending $70 for the 2 of us during those 2 days that we were in Jakarta. Not recommended, but we did order whatever we saw, and we decided, oh, that looks good, so we just bought it. So yeah, we will definitely be trying more local foods now that we're in Bali. So subscribe if you'd like to see those videos in the future. I'm gonna be trying the local food, something I regret not doing enough of in Vietnam. I didn't show you guys a lot of the food that I had there, and so I really want to take you guys into the Indonesian culture as much as possible, and food is definitely a big part of that. So subscribe if you'd like to see future food videos here in Indonesia. So as far as transportation while we're in Jakarta, that cost us about $30 for those 2 days. So from the quarantine hotel to the Airbnb, which was a 45-minute ride, it's a big city. And from there, we went to the mall, so a few different places that we went to. It cost us $30 for 2 days in Jakarta. So once we decided we have to leave to go to Bali ASAP because the cases were going up, we booked a ticket the day before. So that was $66 per person, which is $132 for the 2 of us. So $132 from Jakarta to Bali, which was just over an hour flight, I believe. So now the grand total of this whole trip, if we were to do exactly the same thing but with only 1 person, the total would be $1,794. So $1,794 for 1 person. In our case, for 2 people, it cost us $2,938. Like I said, I know it's not cheap. Now I'm gonna get into how you could possibly save over $500 on your trip. But first, I'd like to ask, if you find this video helpful whatsoever, please hit the like button. It'll help this video spread to more people. So now let's get into how you can actually save money on your trip. So the first thing you can do is when you're looking for flights, look on Skyscanner and Google Flights, compare the prices, and try to see what day of the week will be cheapest, all right? Depending on the day, it could be a big difference. It could be $100 difference for a flight just because you're flying on Tuesday instead of Saturday. So make sure you compare the prices, you look on both platforms, find the best deal for you. The next thing is also to find the longest possible. Now, it's not the most convenient, but if your goal is to save as much money as possible, you'll probably have to do 22 hours instead of 13, because you're gonna have to stay in, for example, Singapore for 9 hours instead of us staying there for 1 hour. So those are some things you can do. Find the longest flight path possible. That will usually be a lot cheaper too. And one more quick tip for you is try to book directly through the airline rather than a third party. Me and some friends have found it easier to deal with them if there's any issues like flight cancellations. So that's not necessarily a money saving tip, but it might make your trip a bit easier if you had to call the airline directly rather than have to go through a third party. So somewhere else that you might be able to save money is the hotel. So we personally went to Saigon and we stayed there for one night. So instead of paying $17, I'm sure we could have found another hotel maybe a bit further that would be a lot cheaper than $17. So you could have possibly found a hotel for, let's say, $10 or less. The next thing you could save money on is your return ticket. Like I said, we were at the counter waiting to get on our flight to Singapore when they told us we had to show a return ticket, so we didn't have much time, so we just got one. So that one you could easily find a ticket, I don't know, to Singapore. If you do exactly what I actually just mentioned to you, you find the best date for you, you could easily find a flight for $60. So that would have saved you a lot of money. So that would be $120 if it's for 2 people. Then there's the quarantine hotel. That one, like I said, we did pick the biggest room in that hotel, so you can definitely save money there. We ended up paying $875. You could probably pay $575 if you find another hotel and you don't get the biggest room in there. So you could easily pay $400 per person for a quarantine hotel in Jakarta, or $575 for 2 people. And the next money saving tip that I have for you is don't stay in Jakarta. So we decided after quarantine we would just get out and explore Jakarta, where we spent most of the money, I think, as far as we went to the mall, we went shopping, which I'm not gonna include here because whatever we bought for ourselves doesn't really matter. It's not included in the trip really. It's not a necessity, but just don't stay in Jakarta. So after quarantine, you can just get out of quarantine hotel and get on your flight to Bali. So we decided not to do that, which then we started incurring expenses such as the transportation and Airbnb. All those things, you can just skip them and save yourself a lot more money. So if we had done exactly what I just told you guys, we would have spent $2,368 instead of $2,938 that we ended up spending for 2 people. Now if it's for 1 person and we had done the same exact thing that I just told you guys, you would spend $1,304 instead of $1,794. That is a possible savings of at least $500 just by implementing those little things. And there are quite a few more things you could do to save money, but those are some easy things that you can do. So if you're planning your trip, don't be discouraged by our numbers. You could save a lot more money by just doing some simple things to save some more money. And $500 could be an extra 2 months worth of rent once you get to Bali. So I think it's a no-brainer. On that note, soon I'll be tracking how much we actually spend here in Bali for a full 30 days. So if you're interested in knowing what is the cost of living here in Bali, or if you're interested in any future videos about Bali in general, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when any of those videos go live. And until next time, create a life worth living.